Today's daf is of Tzadik Omid Aleph. Yesterday I quoted a thesis and someone corrected me, but actually I was right. So I just want to repeat it again because I sort of acceded to the person. Teis in the Bein Tam, the last thing he said was that if there was a get that was given, and then the rumors spread about it that that the get was disqualified, so he made them write a second get. But nevertheless, the halacha of 3 months that you have to remain apart before you can get remarried, so we can distinguish the child, determine whether it's from the first husband, second husband. You don't date it from the second star; you actually date it from the first star, which is really the star. The second one just to appease all those gossip mongers. We are up to now the last Mishnah of Gittin, and you have to wonder why this is the last Mishnah, perhaps not the first Mishnah, as to when do you give a get. So we have 3 opinions here: Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva. Beis Shammai is of the opinion that lo yigarish adam es ishta, you don't divorce a wife early in Canaan unless matzabot davar ever, unless you found by her something which is she committed adultery, an issue that you cannot live together, you shouldn't divorce. Big machlekes in the poskim whether according to Beis Shammai, and this argument in the Mishnah is going to be, therefore, if you give a divorce for any other reason, it's not a valid divorce. This is the only grounds for divorce. Or this like an eighth of favor. This is this circumstance is a good idea to give divorce. But if you give a divorce for any other reason, it's still a valid divorce. And afilu higdicha tafshiloi. Even if she burnt your food, and Rashi goes into details which is difficult to understand, whether she cooked it she burnt it through a fire or she oversalted it. And that's also like burning the food. Exactly what Rashi wants was not clear. But it seemed, in other words, she had to still do something that offended you. And otherwise, if you have no ground, just we grew apart is not a valid reason according to Beis Hillel. And going back to the poskim, so according to one opinion, if you give a get stam, it's not a valid get at all. Because the other one is just an eitzah of teva. Others say this is actually euphemism. We're talking about that she refuses to have intimacy or things in that nature. Shneimar says ki matzah ervas davar. Hillel is emphasizing not the word erva, but the word davar. Davar means a matter that offends you. Rabbi Akiva goes a step further. Afilu matzah cheres nohei mena. You found a woman prettier than your wife. That's grounds for divorce. Remember, it says the pasuk begins actually. She no longer finds favor in your eyes. Now that's very difficult to understand. There is a sikh of the Rebbe which I unfortunately don't have a chance to look up, but the Rebbe finds it very difficult. Rabbi Akiva, who is the architect of the famous rules of Ahapirich Moiches, the Klal Gadol B'Torah, should be the one to be so callous about relationships. Anyway, but it does say in Sfarim, if I remember correctly, that the pshat in the Mishnah Akiva is saying here is, if you're starting to notice other women and comparing them to your wife, that means there's something much more profound lacking in your relationship, and therefore, if you can't sort it out, then it's not fair for her, and move on. Because a machlek is a pasuk, believe it or not. If you learn the way we said that any other get, if you don't have if didn't commit adultery, didn't offend you, you didn't start noticing other wives that are prettier than your wife, then you're not allowed to give a get. If you do, it's not valid. So there's a whole machlek is what happens if you noticed other women that are richer than your wife, and you're falling on hard times. Can you give a get to your wife so you can marry this other woman? Interesting.
Can I ask a question? This is long before Rabbeinu Gershom's time. So why didn't Rabbi Akiva say, let him just marry a second wife who's more attractive than the first or richer? Why does he have to divorce?
That proves the point. That obviously it's much more profound than just noticing other women that are prettier. Obviously, your own relationship is not. There's a lot more to a relationship than having somebody attractive. Right? It's much deeper than that. And if you're starting to notice those other things, means that there's something lacking in your in your very foundation of your marriage. That if you can't deal with it, then for her sake, the love is not there anymore. That's what this seems Rabbi Akiva to be saying. Rabbi Akiva seems to be saying. So Tanya will let the Brisa. What's going on here? What is the argument between Rabbi Akiva and Beis Hillel? The halacha like Beis Hillel, but what is there's a big argument where Rabbi Akiva is arguing with Beis Hillel, or Rabbi Akiva is just explaining Beis Hillel. Tanya Bilin, Amr Beisil Bisham, Beisil Bisham, Lekharnemer, it says a pasuk davar. How can you limit a get only to a case where, let's say, there was adultery committed when it says ervas davar? Davar means any matter. Amr Bisham said, I'll ask you back. But Lekharnemer ervas, the Torah says ervas davar. Erva means literally that there was some adultery. What are you telling me that if she burnt the food? Amr Lehem Beisil, Beisil is enough. Im nemar ervas. You had to say both. Im nemar ervas. If it only would have said ervas, v'loy nemar davar, I would have thought like you. Hayishiyah mishum erva takes if should davar like takes it. That's the only time you should divorce your wife. There's another machlek is whether there's a mitzvah to divorce your wife then, or there's a chayv, an obligation that you have to divorce your wife. In other words, let's say you're Michael her, you still have to divorce. So I would have thought when is it appropriate to divorce in the case where there's adultery. But what about in the case we just, it's offensive and it's not working out? Maybe you shouldn't, or it's not a good idea to divorce. The kachnem davar tells you davar. No, if the Torah just say davar, if for those reasons you can divorce her, surely there's adultery, if she betrayed your trust. You know what I would have thought? I would have thought, okay, if the marriage is not working out and she offends you and so on, okay, you give her a get. But if there was adultery, then maybe not only do you give her a get, but she can never remarry anyone else because she's unfaithful. How can anyone else trust it? So I thought, when does she have the? Because later on in the pasuk it talks about the yotzav she went to marry another person. So I would say, when she's allowed to marry another person, if the grounds of divorce was because davar, but if the grounds of the divorce was because of mistrust, then late to nasilacha, maybe she has no right to ever get married again. I need both ervas and davar. Davar to tell you what the grounds you can divorce, and ever tell you that even in such a case she can be married. Beishamai, hi davar. What does Beishamai do with the word davar? He said it's limited only to erva. So why does the Torah also talk about davar? He said to teach you another halacha altogether. That what nema kan davar. Here it says the word davar to teach you gzera shava. Where else do we have the word davar? The nema lahalan davar. We also find later on the word davar. That we need a minimum of 2 or 3 witnesses, and we're learning Gemara Makkah at the end of the first paragraph why, if you have 2 witnesses, surely 3 witnesses are good enough. Why is it trying to say 2 or 3? But there it says davar. Davar means it has to be verified. Malahalam b'shnei edim, we need witnesses. Afkan b'shnei edim. When we say that you should divorce your wife based on adultery, it's not just because of a rumor. It's talking about if there were witnesses that quarter. Base Hill knew. So if so, we need the word davar for what Shammai says. Erva, davar is no longer superfluous. How does Base Hill learn from the word davar for any matter? Well, Base Hill miksiv erva bit davar. If he would have been right, if Shammai had been right, that it's the only grounds are erva, and davar is telling you and it has to be proven, then it should have said erva bit davar. Through a davar, by saying just erva, ervas davar sounds like either erva or davar. So the Gemara Beisham goes back. According to you, it should have said or erva or davar. In other words, either one of the grounds. It doesn't say that. It says ervas davar. And Basil says no. Therefore, it says ervas davar. The reason why it says ervas davar, the mashmahachi, to tell you could be either an erva or it could be a davar, in order to darshan also that you need edim as well. In other words, to teach you two dinim. Basically, so I agree with you that erva, when you want to divorce your wife forever, it has to be with edim. So I need the word davar to teach you that. But if it's only teaching that, it should have said bid davar. Therefore, it says davar to tell you. There's another thing we want to learn from here, and that is that even davar, even just offended you somehow or another, you can't live together. That's grounds also. Rabbi Kiva comes along and says, "Afilu matzachedes." He found another one more attractive. That's grounds for divorce. But my committee, what are they arguing? Says Yimar Rishlakish. Beisham and Beis Hill really learned the same way. They're only arguing the word erva. Erva is davar, or is it one thing or two things? But Rabbi Kiva learns totally differently. That is, the Amar Rishlakish, Rishlakish says, "Ki mishamesh bedalad l'sheinis." The word ki has 4 different meanings. If, Dilma perhaps, Ella but, or daha because. And here it says, im, and the passage over here, the word im. Im loy simtzachei beina. What's the im? Im because, You didn't find you no longer find her attractive. Is that the grounds for the divorce is im because, or im is if whatever and ever dover and so on. The Shammai saw keep dover. The Beishamai says that if you didn't find, if you no longer finds favor, why? As the pasuk continues, because sorry, key is we're talking about the word key. That because why is it loy simtzachem be'enav? Why taka? It because you found by her Erbas David. But only Chagil is Beishamai says the emphasis on the word Erbas, and Erbas David is one thing, and Hill says no Erba oy Erba oy David. But the key means because. Why did you not find? You find you're no longer attractive, you no longer have a relationship because this is what happened. Okay, that's basically Beishamai. The Hamatz Erbas David, and Rabbi Kiva holds. Ki matzav be'eres dover means inami matzav be'eres dover. Ki means if. That if you also found out. First of all, the pasuk says that stop. You no longer find her attractive. That's enough reason. Another reason is even if you find her attractive, but you committed adultery or whatever it is, then there's a mitzvah to divorce, or it's a good idea to divorce. Now, very interesting, a very long Rashi here, where he goes through. Gives many examples where ki means if, and ki means perhaps, and ki means but. But what's interesting is Rashi tells us that when we say Oz Yosher, and we say we say with the ki vosus pari berich by Baroshav, Rashi says that we know that that's not part of the Shira. And ki vosus pari actually belongs to the next part. Why did Miriam take the symbols and dance? Ki because therefore Vayikach Miriam, and Miriam went out there and thing. And Abraham writes that's why in davening we say Hashem Yivcha twice to tell you that this is the end of the Shira. This is no longer part of the Shira. So Rashi says that here. The Ramban says that in Chumash. Traces here sort of agrees with Rashi, because some people say it's preposterous to say that, and some people bring the Ramban and say Ramban is a long opinion. It's right in this long Rashi. The Rashi says here. It's interesting. Rashi should remember it. Rashi's in the wide lines. 2, 4, 6. 8 lines in the wide lines, right in the middle of the Rashi there. V'chi basus parei, says Rashi, 8 lines in the wide lines at the bottom of the page. Mipnei shebasus parei, because the sus parei came, lefichach vatikach Miriam. That's why Miriam took her instruments and they went singing. Fascinating. Okay. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara. What happened? Let's say you did not find an error. In other words, when I told you before that there's a machlek in the poskim hadal pshat, the machlek is really whether it's a mitzvah or a chayv. Is there a chayv to divorce her in this thing here, or is it just a mitzvah on these grounds? Beishamai says that, Basil says this, it's a mitzvah. Good idea. Or is it a chayv that you have to? But you have to. What happens if you went and divorced her not based on any of these grounds? Is the get a valid get? Even though before we said that's questionable, the Gemara now asks this question itself. And you gave her a get. What's it din? According to the Beis Hillel example, is divorced or not? When a person is ma'anish, rapes a girl, the din is that he has to marry a Elisha. And it says, you cannot divorce her. And we learn that the Gemara, that kol yamav, every time you divorce her, you got to take her back. And we have a special pasuk for that. So therefore, if every wife, the thing is that if you divorce her for the wrong reasons, it's not a valid divorce. So you got to take her back. So what do you need a special pasuk by Ma'anis? Since the Torah only reveals us when the case where he rapes her, to tell you in that case you always have to take it back. But other cases, even if you gave her a divorce for the wrong reasons, once you gave it to her correctly, it's a divorce. But you did. You don't think it's the right thing to do, but you did it. A question. What happened if you thought about divorcing your wife? She continues behaving. You didn't tell her yet. You didn't divorce her. You're planning to divorce her, and she continues to serve you. Mahu, is that permitted or not? Is that like the opposite of Abbas Yisrael? You're using her now, or not?
Says Gemara, over here, we will read the following pasuk. Says the pasuk, Al tacheresh al yachro. You shouldn't devise plans or have strategies against your friend, evil strategies. And meanwhile, who yoishel v'tichitoch, and that other person thinks that you're good friends. You're best confident that you're working out all right when you intend to divorce her. And we actually had him on the Durham, and there's a long balaturim in Yisrael. There's a thing called the different psulim. You have kids that don't work out properly, and one of them is if it's the son of a wife that you are intending to divorce, it's called b'nei grusha. The kids born out of that after you decide to divorce, you still have an intimacy. The kids grow up to be kalkas. So what's he asking over here? He's asking the Rabbi, is there a problem? So someone will say that we're not talking here about intimacy. We're talking about do housewife chores. Even that, is that permitted or not? And the Rabbi says you're deceiving her. It's not the right thing to do. Or over there is talking about that night when you're having intimacy, you already planned tomorrow to give her a get. It's all been written up and everything is already done. That is totally forbidden. Here he's talking about in the back of your mind, you say, you know what? I have to divorce her. Didn't work out a time yet or anything else. Not immediate. And that's the question. Time we learned. He gives an analogy here, a little bit crude, but he wants to say that three different kinds of behavior in people when it comes to divorce. They are, and he brings an analogy from food. He said, just like that, three kinds of people, how they treat food when have a fly that falls in. You have three kinds of people that how they treat their wife when it comes to divorce. And this is an analogy. The same thing with relationships. Yes, there are people a fly falls into his cup. The zarka, he tosses away the einish. He throws the entire soup away. Not just the fly, he throws the entire soup away. The Zui midas Papas ben Yehuda. There's a guy called Papas ben Yehuda. He didn't trust his wife with certain people. He said, you know what? Maybe she's very as an extrovert. She didn't. He locked her up at home. Unfortunately, you have wife abuse. Can't talk to her family. Can't go talk to her relatives. Disconnect the phone. You take total coercion, and that's a terrible thing. Rashi tells us that Papas ben Yehuda was married to Miriam Megadlim Nashaya. Miriam, the one there who used to be a hair salon, and we a beautician or a barber. We had this in the beginning of Chagiga when the Malach HaMavas got the wrong woman. When he had to kill Miriam and he killed the wrong Miriam. And I'm not sure exactly why Rashi tells us that it's her or its irrelevance, and how do you know it's her? But that's what Rashi tells us. Maybe explaining what happened there with the Malach HaMavos is more to the story than that. And why is this a terrible thing? Because obviously there's really no relationship. It'll be a terrible relationship. She'll be scared of you rather than respect you and love you. And who knows? Okay, that's number one. And she can poison you with mushrooms as well. You never know what you can do. So therefore, it's not a good way of having relationships. Number two, the yesh lecha adam is a person shezvuv neiful terkai. So a fly falls in the cup. The zarka, you throw away the fly. We should say you drink the rest. Zui midas kol adam. Now what? If she wants to talk to her friends and relatives and all that, not a problem. But obviously, you're not happy if she's very flirtatious with strangers. That's like the fly. That's a normal relationship. The yesh lecha adam, but there are people shezvuv neiful terkai. A fly falls into a big platter of food. Moitzitzei va'oichlei. I guess it disintegrated into the food, and he eats it, and he swallowed it. He doesn't care. Zui midas adam ra. That's not the behavior of a good marriage either. If you don't mind if your wife, there's infidelity in the marriage, it's not a healthy relationship. In fact, he doesn't have to necessarily see her having intimacy, but he sees how she dresses. She goes without her head covered. The tava b'shuk, and she weaves in the marketplace, so therefore she's not sneezing because she opens her legs and everything else. Uprumish nature there, and she has what's it called? When her chest, the bosom, is revealed. And she bathes together with people. No, she's leading a very promiscuous life. And she bathes together with men. Says the Gemara, she bathes together with men. If she bathes together with men, then we'll say definitely she's a zoina. It doesn't say whether she's naked or whether she's wearing a bathing suit. But I guess in those days nobody ever swam together. Then it's much more than just it's not a good idea. Then you have a chiyuv to divorce it because you definitely can assume that she is a zoina. She goes when people are leaving. She goes in, and they can all see. So obviously, she entices them, but she did nothing wrong yet. It's just the behavior, the whole comportment. Zu mitzvah and legasha. This is a mitzvah in the Torah to divorce her. A mitzvah. It doesn't say choiv. No, this is a good thing. She never says ki matzah ba erva v'shilchum bebeisa v'hol choiv shachar. Sorry, v'shilchum bebeisa. That if you found by her erva's dover, you should send her away from the house. And now we're saying that erva's dover doesn't necessarily mean, like we said before, dover with edim and everything else. Maybe that's when it's a choiv. But if you just see that whole kind of behavior, it's not correct, and therefore you should. If you're so immodest, you should send her away from the house. You should divorce. Then the pasuk says, and what happened was, she went. The pasuk is telling you if she married somebody else and then she got divorced, she can't come back to you. But it uses the expression ish acher. What kind of expression? Ish acher, another person. Obviously another person. What do you mean? The Torah says acher, that person really is a stranger to her. This is definitely not the appropriate shirt for the first person. Turned out to be he was the wrong person for the first one. And why did he? What were the grounds? Because of now, how do you know? How is that stranger supposed to know that was the grounds for divorce? I think people tell everybody why they're divorced. That's why the Gemara says we're talking about there was a display of immodesty. It wasn't something that happened in privacy in their own homes, and nobody knows. Everyone knew who she was, exactly who she was, and therefore, obviously, that's the grounds for their divorce. It didn't work out. So, why in the world are you marrying her? That's why we call her an acher. She's not your wife either, and you shouldn't have married her. So, therefore, the text like this: Zacha, if the second person at least is not so bad, is Shani Shilcha. He'll become intelligent enough that he will realize that this is not a healthy relationship, and he will divorce her. Remember, it says in the pasuk that what happened with the second person, the second person hated her as well, wrote her a get, and she can't go back to the first one. But the imlav, if this person not zech, he's very happy that his wife is immodest. He knew about it before he married her, and he took her in, and he's very happy with that kind of behavior. Then you know what's going to happen at the end? She'll outlive you and she'll bury you. She'll become the black widow. Because after she'll bury you, it says either they divorce or he dies, and then she wants to go back to the first person. Because this second person actually deserves it. This person threw out because of her mother's behavior, and you took her in. Then the pasuk says, "Kisane shalach amar Hashem." Hashem hates the person who sends away. So there's two ways of understanding. Rabbi Yehuda says, "What does it mean? Kisane shalach amar Hashem." Hashem says, "You hate, you should send away." Is that how you reply? That's how Rabbi Yehuda says. Im sonesa shalach. He says that, like Rabbi Akiva, so when Rabbi Akiva said Matzah Isha Nohe Mena, you found a woman more attractive, and here we're using the pasuk Im Sonesa, so it's a lot more profound than just you saw somebody else more attractive. It means that there's no love anymore in your marriage, and that's why you're looking around and you're seeing everything, everything around you. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says it's not healthy to stay married in a case like that. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not referring to the husband if he despises his wife, they should divorce, but rather Sonu HaMashalech. Hashem is very upset that you divorced your wife. Which one is it? Says the Gemara. It sounds like what do you call it? So how do you understand? The first marriage, you have to do everything possible to make sure that the marriage works, because this is your bashert, and you have to make it work. But bezug sheni, when it comes to the second marriage, if there are major issues, you don't have to invest as much kaya, because perhaps this is not your bashert, because we had in Morasaita that the first marriage is your bashert, abar miyayim, 40 days before you're born, is all planned. The second one is lefi ma'asav, that it's where you're up to the world. Depending on who you are, that's the kind of wife you end up getting. And sometimes the reason why you divorced, you didn't realize how bad you were, because the wife that you got, is misbehaving. So, and this is a reflection of you, and you realize how you yourself are not very good as well, and you want to maybe improve. But again,
what if it's the Zug for one of the spouses?
Yeah,
and the Zug Sheni for the second one.
That's a good question. So they actually try to understand. You Zug Rishon, let's say it doesn't work out, and you divorce. So what's pshat? Is the pshat that this wasn't your bashert, it was a mistake, or pshat that exactly was what was bashert? So if there was a child there, generally everyone says that was a plan, that these two people were able to bring this neshama down, and nobody else could, so they had to be. And then, okay, whatever happens afterwards. But if there was no children involved, and they just got divorced, so how do we understand what happened? So then the Zug Sheni becomes really his Zug Rishon, because no, that really was the bashert, which is what some of the Rishonim say. Interesting. Anyway, talking about it further. The Amar Abelazar says, the first wife that you had, even the Mizbeach cried, because the Mizbeach is involved in your marriage, because every time you have a child, you bring it to the Mizbeach, and they're involved. And it says in the pasuk that the Zois this Sheinis Tasu. This is what the second one does. Hashem, that you cover with tears. The Mizbeach of Hashem, Bechi v'Anaka, tears and krechts and groaning. Me'ein oid pinus ala mincha. There's no longer any kabbanas. The Mizbeach doesn't even want your kabbanas anymore. V'lakachta rotzim yedchem, took the desire away from you. V'amartim, you said, why? Aki Hashem heyid, because Hashem testifies, beincha ubein eish nerecha. Hashem was so happy with the first wife in your youth. Asher ata bagadata ba, you betrayed her. The your first wife is not only your bashert, but she is your friend. The Aish is brisecha, and she is, like you're part of your pact. Hadna locha megadish or slikla mesech the Gittin. This completes the Gittin, and now